The courtroom was bustling as Judge Harold Bennett took his seat at the bench. His towering figure, coupled with his sharp tone and piercing gaze, commanded attention. Known for his curt judgments and impatience for drawn-out cases, he was a figure both respected and feared in the local legal circles. Today, the docket was stacked with minor infractions, exactly the kind of cases Bennett found tedious. When the bailiff called out the next case, his eyes flickered to the file. Case 2710, State of Franklin versus Elise Carter, the bailiff announced. A woman rose from the gallery. Dressed in a simple black blazer and matching skirt, Elise Carter walked to the defendant's table with a grace that drew attention. Her expression was composed, her posture upright. The room quieted as murmurs died down, sensing an unusual energy about her presence. "Ms. Carter, Judge Bennett," began, his voice laced with skepticism. "You stand charged with failure to appear in court for a prior speeding violation and obstruction of justice when officers attempted to execute the warrant. Do you have representation?" "I'll be representing myself, Your Honor," Elise replied, her voice raised. Her eyes flashed, a warning to Elise. "Let's see how that works out for you." The audience in the gallery exchanged glances, some suppressing smirks. It wasn't unusual for Bennett to make sarcastic remarks, but there was something sharper about his tone today. The state's attorney stepped forward, a middle-aged man with a meticulously trimmed beard and an air of confidence. "Your Honor, the defendant has shown a repeated disregard for court orders. Not only did she fail to appear for her hearing, but when officers approached her residence to serve the warrant, she refused to comply and obstructed their investigation." Elise remained silent, her expression calm as the prosecutor spoke. "Furthermore," he continued, "her speeding violation occurred in a school zone, endangering the lives of children." Judge Bennett glanced at Elise with a hardened gaze. "Mrs. Carter, do you understand the severity of these charges?" "Yes, Your Honor," she replied calmly. "Do you wish to respond?" "I do," Elise said, standing. She walked to the lectern, her movements measured and deliberate. "With all due respect, Your Honor, the charges against me are based on false premises. I have evidence to refute the claims made by the prosecution." Bennett smirked. "False premises? Go ahead, Ms. Carter. Enlighten us." Elise opened a folder on the lectern, removing a stack of documents. First, Your Honor, the speeding violation. My car was in a mechanic's shop at the time of the alleged incident. This invoice from the shop confirms the dates and times." She handed the document to the bailiff, who delivered it to the judge. "Second," Elise continued, "regarding the claim that I obstructed justice, I was not home when officers arrived. My neighbor, who tried to explain this to the officers, was mistakenly identified as resisting arrest. This affidavit from my neighbor corroborates my account." Another document was passed to the judge. Bennett scanned the papers quickly, his expression unreadable. "And how do you explain your failure to appear in court?" "I never received notice of the hearing," Elise replied. "The address on file was incorrect, despite my efforts to update it. This email correspondence with the court clerk demonstrates my attempt to rectify the matter." The judge's smirk faltered. He thumbed through the pages, his irritation growing. "Ms. Carter," he said, his tone sharp, "while your evidence is compelling, your demeanor suggests you think you're above reproach. This is my courtroom, and I won't tolerate arrogance." Elise's calm exterior cracked slightly as her eyes narrowed. She took a deep breath before replying. "Your Honor, I believe I've presented my case respectfully and accurately. If defending myself comes across as arrogance, then I apologize for the misunderstanding." The hearing concluded for the day, with Judge Bennett deferring his ruling until he could review the evidence. Elise left the courtroom quietly, her head held high, but the tension between her and the judge lingered in the air. That evening, as Judge Bennett reviewed the case file in his chambers, a knock on the door interrupted his focus. It was his clerk, Melanie, holding a tablet. "Judge, you might want to see this," she said, handing it to him. Bennett frowned as he looked at the screen. It was a local news article titled, "High-Profile Case, Mayor's Wife Faces Courtroom Drama." The photo accompanying the article showed Elise Carter standing beside none other than Mayor Marcus Carter, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Bennett's heart sank. His mind raced as he connected the dots. Elise Carter wasn't just any defendant. She was the wife of the city's most powerful figure. The next day, Bennett entered the courtroom with a strained expression. Elise was already seated, her demeanor unchanged. The prosecutor looked equally uneasy, having likely seen the same article. Before the hearing resumed, Bennett cleared his throat. "Miss Carter," he began, his voice notably softer, "I want to ensure that this court remains impartial and fair. Your status outside this courtroom has no bearing on these proceedings." Elise raised an eyebrow, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Of course, Your Honor. I wouldn't expect anything less." The gallery exchanged whispers, sensing a shift in the courtroom's dynamic. The day after the courtroom spectacle, the media storm showed no signs of subsiding. Headlines splashed across every local news outlet, painted the case as a clash between power and justice. Words like bias, controversy, and humiliation trended online, and Judge Harold Bennett found himself at the center of it all. The judge's chambers were no sanctuary. Calls flooded in from journalists, demanding statements, and his inbox brimmed with emails. Some supportive, others scathing. His clerk, Melanie, peeked her head through the door, her expression tense. "Judge, the Chief Justice is on the line," she said. Bennett sighed and rubbed his temples. "Put him through." The voice on the other end was as cold as steel. "Harold," the Chief Justice began, "I've been fielding calls all morning about your courtroom antics. Do you have any idea the position you've put the judiciary in?" Bennett bristled. "I handled the case impartially. I can't control how the media twists things." "Impartial," the Chief Justice snapped. "You humiliated the mayor's wife in open court, dismissed her evidence without due consideration, and now you're neck-deep in allegations of bias. This isn't just about you. It's about the credibility of the entire judicial system." Bennett clenched his jaw. "So, what do you suggest I do?" "Fix this, Harold, fast, or you won't just lose this case. You'll lose your career." Meanwhile, at the mayor's residence, Elise Carter and her husband Marcus Carter were strategizing. Their dining room had been converted into a makeshift war room, with papers and laptops scattered across the table. "Now we use that to our advantage," Marcus nodded, but looked uneasy. "The public is on your side for now, but this could backfire. If they dig too deep, they might find something we can't control." "Let them dig," Elise replied, her confidence unshaken. "We have nothing to hide. Besides, this isn't just about me. It's about exposing a system that's broken." Marcus reached for her hand. "I support you, Elise, but promise me you'll tread carefully. The deeper you go, the more dangerous this gets." Elise gave him a faint smile. "I know exactly what I'm doing." Later that evening, Judge Bennett sat alone in his study, reviewing the case file for the 10th time. The evidence Elise had submitted was flawless, airtight and compelling. But what troubled him more was the additional information that had surfaced during the hearing. The emails hinted at corruption within the police department, and the term high priority gnawed at him. It was clearly a targeted effort, but why had Elise been singled out? And who else was involved? His phone buzzed. It was another text from an unknown number. "You don't want to know how deep this goes. Drop the case." Bennett stared at the message, his pulse quickening. He had received similar messages in the past week, but this one carried a sharper edge, a warning and a threat rolled into one. The following day, Judge Bennett was approached by an unexpected visitor as he entered the courthouse. A man in his late 40s with graying hair and a tailored suit stood near the entrance. His presence exuded authority. "Judge Bennett," the man said, extending a hand. "Special Agent Robert Lane, FBI. We need to talk." Bennett froze. "FBI? What's this about?" Lane's expression was unreadable. "Your current case has intersected with an ongoing investigation into political corruption. We believe Miss Carter's charges were fabricated as part of a larger scheme." Bennett blinked. "Fabricated? By whom?" Lane hesitated. "That's what we're trying to determine. But I can tell you this much. The corruption runs deep, and you're in the middle of it now." Inside Bennett's chambers, Lane laid out a series of documents and photos. "We've been investigating irregularities in the city's judicial and law enforcement systems for over a year," Lane explained. "Your court has seen several cases that were flagged as high priority. It's a code used by certain individuals to target or intimidate specific people." Bennett's mind raced. "Are you saying I've been unknowingly complicit in this?" "Not knowingly," Lane replied, "but your courtroom has been used as a tool, and Miss Carter's case might be the one that exposes it all." Bennett leaned back, his thoughts spiraling. If Lane was right, then Elise Carter's case wasn't just a legal dispute, it was the linchpin in unraveling a massive conspiracy. While Bennett grappled with the implications, Elise was preparing for her next move. She had been approached by multiple news outlets for interviews, but she had declined them all, until now. That evening, Elise appeared on a popular news program, her poised demeanor captivating the audience. "This case isn't just about me," she said. "It's about holding those in power accountable. No one should be above the law, not even those who enforce it." Her words resonated, and within hours, public support for her case reached a fever pitch. Social media exploded with hashtags like "Justice for Elise" and "End Corruption Now." But not everyone was thrilled with Elise's rising influence. That night, as she and Marcus prepared for bed, their home phone rang. Marcus answered, his expression darkening as he listened. When he hung up, Elise asked, "Who was that?" Marcus hesitated. "Of warning. They said if you don't drop the case, they'll make us regret it." Elise's jaw tightened. Let them try. The next court session was packed with spectators, reporters, and activists. Elise entered the room with the confidence of someone who knew they had already won in the court of public opinion. Judge Bennett, however, looked visibly strained. The weight of the FBI's warning, the text messages, and the media scrutiny had taken its toll. As the hearing began, the prosecutor requested a continuance, citing the need to review new evidence. Bennett granted it, but not before glancing at Elise. Her calm gaze met his, and for a moment, they understood each other. This was bigger than either of them. The atmosphere in the courthouse had shifted. What was once a routine building of law and order now buzzed with tension, as if the walls themselves could sense the growing unease. The Elise Carter case had morphed into something far larger than anyone could have anticipated. Activists protested outside, reporters crowded the hallways, and whispers of corruption spread like wildfire. Judge Harold Bennett, however, was fighting a battle on multiple fronts. His late-night reading sessions revealed more unsettling connections between Elise's charges and a larger conspiracy within the city's law enforcement and judiciary. The FBI's involvement loomed over him like a storm cloud, and the anonymous threats continued to escalate. During a break in the day's hearing, as the agent took a seat across from Agent Robert Lane to his chambers. This case, he needed clarity. It's bigger than Elise Carter, isn't it now? Lane nodded. It is. Elise was targeted because she's connected to someone powerful, her husband, Mayor Carter. But this isn't just about the mayor. The corruption we're investigating spans multiple departments, police, city council, even the courts. It's systemic. And what am I supposed to do? Bennett asked, his voice tight. Every move I make is scrutinized. Every decision feels like a trap. Lane leaned forward. You focus on the facts. Don't let the threats distract you. But, Judge, you should know, we've intercepted chatter suggesting there's a faction within the system that wants this case buried, no matter the cost. Bennett's stomach churned. How far are they willing to go? Lane's expression darkened. Far enough. Stay alert and keep your family out of this. Meanwhile, Elise Carter wasn't sitting idle. She had hired a private investigator, an old friend who specialized in uncovering secrets buried in bureaucracy. The investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Miranda Chase, brought her findings to Elise in a neatly organized folder. This, Miranda said, sliding a document across the table, is a list of cases flagged as high priority over the past 3 years. Almost all of them involve individuals who posed a threat to certain city officials, activists, journalists, even a few rival politicians. Elise flipped through the pages, her face hardening. And these cases were handled in Judge Bennett's court? Most of them, Miranda confirmed. But here's the kicker. Some of the individuals involved have disappeared. No arrests, no trials. That night, Elise returned home to find Marcus pacing the living room. His phone was clutched tightly in his hand and his face was pale. Not while you're in the public eye, her voice but if they can't silence you one way, he handed her the phone. Another. On the screen was a text message. Back off, or you won't see tomorrow. Elise's hands trembled slightly, but her resolve didn't waver. They're scared, she said quietly. Marcus gripped her shoulders. Elise, this isn't just about you anymore. If something happens to you, what am I supposed to tell our kids? How am I supposed to live with that? She placed her hands over his. We can't let them win, Marcus. If we back down the next day, they'll only keep doing this to us again. I won't. Elise sat at the defendant's table, her face calm but determined. Judge Bennett entered, his expression unreadable. Before the proceedings began, the prosecutor requested to dismiss all charges against Elise. Your Honor, the prosecutor said, avoiding eye contact with Elise, in light of new evidence, the state believes there is insufficient basis to proceed with this case. The gallery erupted into murmurs. Judge Bennett slammed his gavel, silencing the room. Miss Carter, do you have any objections to the dismissal? He asked. Elise stood, her voice firm. I don't object, Your Honor, but I do have a question. Will this court ensure that those responsible for fabricating these charges are held accountable? The gallery buzzed again. Bennett glanced at Elise, his face betraying a flicker of respect. This court will do its duty, Ms. Carter, he said, his tone measured. As the hearing ended and Elise stepped out of the courthouse, a car screeched to a halt in front of. A masked man jumped out, shoving a folded note into her hand before speeding off. Marcus rushed to her side, grabbing the note. It read, "You've won the battle, but not the war." Elise looked at Marcus, her jaw tightening. This isn't Back in his chambers, Bennett received another visit from Agent Lane. The case may be dismissed, Lane said, but the fallout is just beginning. We've identified several individuals linked to the corruption ring, but they're going to fight back hard. Bennett leaned back in his chair, exhaustion etched into his features. And where does that leave me? Lane's gaze was steady. That depends on you, Judge. Are you willing to stand up for justice even if it costs you everything? Bennett didn't answer immediately. He looked out the window, his mind racing. Could he risk his career and possibly his life to take on something this big? The courtroom was quiet now, its benches empty, the humid voices replaced by an eerie stillness. Elise Carter's case had officially been dismissed, but the storm surrounding it had only grown fiercer. Outside the courthouse, reporters still lingered, and activists chanted slogans demanding accountability. Judge Harold Bennett sat alone in his chambers, staring at his reflection in the darkened window. The Bennett knew the risks. The people behind the corruption ring were powerful, ruthless, and capable of making people disappear permanently. But he also knew that doing nothing would make him complicit in their crimes. His phone buzzed, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was a text message from an unknown number. "We warned you. Drop this now or you'll regret it." Bennett clenched his jaw. He typed out a single reply. "Come for me if you want. I'm done running." At the mayor's residence, Elise Carter was in full battle mode. Her dining room had transformed into a command center, with files, laptops, and maps spread across the table. Marcus Carter watched as she outlined her next steps with the precision of a military strategist. "They tried to bury me," Marcus crossed his arms, her voice steady. "You've already won in the public eye. Why not let this go before it gets worse?" Elise turned to him, her expression fierce. "Because if I stop now, they'll just move on to their next victim. Someone who doesn't have the resources or the platform to fight back." Marcus sighed. "What's the plan?" "I've connected the dots," Elise said, pointing to a map on the wall. "The emails, the flagged cases, the disappearances. It all leads back to a small group of officials who've been using the system to protect their own interests. I'm taking this public." Marcus frowned. "Public? Elise, you're already a target." She smiled faintly. "Exactly. If they come for me now, the whole world will know who's behind it." The next morning, Elise held a press conference on the steps of City Hall. Journalists crowded the space, their cameras trained on her as she approached the podium. "Good morning," Elise began, her voice clear and confident. "Over the past several weeks, my case has revealed troubling truths about our city's justice system. What began as a fabricated charge against me has uncovered a web of corruption that threatens the very foundation of our democracy." She held up a folder. "Here, I have evidence that links key officials to acts of misconduct, coercion, and obstruction of justice. I am calling on federal authorities to investigate and hold these individuals accountable. And to those who think they can silence me, let me be clear. I will not back down." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers, but Elise remained calm, her expression unwavering. That night, Elise and Marcus returned home under heavy police protection. 2 officers were stationed outside their residence, and security cameras monitored every angle of the property. But even with these precautions, Elise knew she wasn't safe. As she prepared for bed, Marcus handed her a note that had been slipped under their door. "You've made your move. Now it's our turn." Elise's hands tightened around the note, but her resolve didn't falter. "Let them try," she said quietly. The next day, Judge Bennett convened a meeting with Agent Lane in his chambers. "I've made my decision," Bennett said. "I'm going to cooperate fully. I'll testify to everything I know and provide any records you need." Lane nodded. "It's the right choice, Judge, but you need to be prepared. There will be consequences." "I've lived my whole life by the letter of the law," Bennett replied. "If I don't stand up now, I'll regret it for the rest of my days." With Judge Bennett's cooperation and Elise's public exposure of the corruption, the wheels of justice began turning at full speed. Federal investigators raided city offices, seizing computers and files. Several officials were arrested, and a grand jury was convened to examine the evidence. The news sent shockwaves through the city. Protesters celebrated in the streets, chanting slogans like "Justice for all" and "No more corruption." Elise, however, remained cautious. She knew that while the public battle had been won, the private war was far from over. As Elise and Marcus were having dinner, the lights in their home suddenly went out. Marcus grabbed a flashlight, but before he could investigate, their phone rang. Elise answered, her voice steady. "You think you've won, Mrs. Carter, but this isn't over. Watch your back." The line went dead. Elise set the phone down, her expression unreadable. "The desperate," she said. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. "And that makes them dangerous." Despite the lingering threats, Elise refused to live in fear. She continued to speak out against corruption, using her platform to advocate for systemic reform. Judge Bennett, meanwhile, became a key witness in the federal investigation, earning both praise and criticism for his role in exposing the truth. In the end, the case wasn't just about justice for Elise. It was about changing a broken system. And while the fight was far from over, she knew she had taken the first step toward a brighter future.
Sometimes it could be a little tough. I just need to feel like the end's in sight for me. But let's be really real, anxiety can foggy all this stuff. I've been feeling weird, I can't seem to focus good enough. Nothing's really clear, sometimes it could be a little tough. I just need to feel like the end's in sight for me. But let's be really real, anxiety can foggy all this stuff.